in the military context is maybe a bit of an anathema to some of you. You're sort of sitting there and thinking, well, surely in the military, I used to walk around with a badge on, bark orders at people, and they had to do what I said, and I had to do whatever I was told to do as well. But actually, the military can't work like that, because you've got people out on the ground doing all sorts of stuff that, as leaders, you can't possibly know about all the time. And at one point in my career, and towards the end of my career, I found myself being the head of strategy on Afghanistan to David Cameron when he was the Prime Minister in 2010. I'd just come out of 6 months serving in Afghanistan, arrived in this job, and 3 weeks into the job, he stood up in Parliament and announced that the UK was going to have all of its combat troops and all of its equipment out of Afghanistan in the next 2 years. At which point, everybody starts to look around, me included, as to who is going to have to lead this epic thing, only to find I was a room of one, and it was me. So there I am, trying to work out, how do you get 11,000 people out of Afghanistan back to the UK? And I had this really pernicious problem that I found extremely challenging to deal with. And it was probably, I'd say this role was probably the most challenging leadership role that I'd ever had in the military. Because when we looked at the equipment that was coming out, there's nearly 20,000 shipping containers worth of equipment that had to come back. And when we looked at the bandwidth, if you like, of the logistics routes that we could bring stuff back on, it was going to take us 18 months, best effort, with no problems, no issues at all, to get all this equipment back. And we only had 2 years. That's now only 6 months faff factor. So that means you've now got to start taking out equipment from day one. So I'm left with this really rather unwelcome psychological issue to deal with of, I'm going to be drawing people out. So there's a population left there who are decreasing and decreasing and decreasing, but they're all at an increasing level of personal risk, because I'm taking out the equipment at the same time that's protecting them. And therefore, the only way in this can really work is to allow people to make their own decisions. And in the military, we call it putting the authority where the information is. Putting the authority where the information is. What you don't want in any organisation going through change or anything else like that is somebody sitting there and going, I've seen this, what do I do? 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 Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, right? It's too slow. We've missed the opportunity and, we need to move on. So the military empower people through a technique we've often called freedom in a framework, where essentially you provide some risk tolerances and you allow people to make their own choices. So I, sitting in Whitehall, would come up with a plan that a particular type of vehicle would come back on a particular day. And we would draw all of that vehicle out. I'd then go out to Afghanistan, to a certain base, do a visit, to find that vehicle still driving around, right? And in the military, we call that consent and evade. I'm going to agree to what you've told me to do and then ignore you and carry on and do what I think is right, all right? And it is about this empowerment. So those bases are basically saying, look, this particular type of vehicle for us in this area is much more useful than a different type of vehicle. So rather than send that vehicle back in the future, I'm going to send it back now and keep the one that I want. So I'm just doing a one-for-one swap. And that became for me quite an interesting learning phase to, as to how to go about change. So